Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.
Hi, and welcome to the latest edition of the ARC Smart Cities podcast. I'm Larry O'Brien, part of the Smart Cities team at ARC Advisory Group. And I have with me here today Eddie Fidler, also of ARC. Good morning, Eddie.
Hey, Larry. Good morning.
And we also have a special guest with us this morning. And today it's on the Smart City platform side of things. We have Stephen Hardy, who is the CEO of MySidewalk. Good morning, Stephen.
Good morning, Larry. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really glad you could make it today. So we're going to talk a little bit about smart city platforms today and the value of data and analytics and all that good stuff, which we're big proponents of here at ARC. So Stephen, tell us a little bit about MySidewalk and what you guys are doing as far as advancing this cause of smart city platforms and so forth.
Yeah, I'd love to, Larry. So MySidewalk is a 8-year-old company. We've always worked with state and local government primarily, and really our mission is to empower change makers. And we've seen the power of data to really do that. And so, we're big believers in using data for good, but we know in the public sector in particular, cities and the staff that work there need some help, and that's really where we're trying to help them connect the needs of the city to the outcomes they're trying to drive for residents. Okay.
And you're in a bunch of different operating domains, right? We're doing some research on smart city platforms right now here at ARC, which is I think how we got introduced to each other. And one of the big challenges with smart city platforms is kind of, there's all these different silos of data in a city, right? And all these different operating domains from health, safety and environment related stuff, fire and police and emergency to government functions. Can you talk a little bit about how you take this data from these different sources and try and make sense of it? And I think one of the challenges we have, talking to end users and owner operators is that they don't always understand right off the bat that there are relationships, between these different silos, and you need to have kind of a unified approach. So how is MySidewalk, addressing that issue?
It's a fundamental question, Larry, and it's such a challenge because this data really hasn't meant much to anybody ever. Certainly departments are used to looking at their own performance data, but they haven't really been able, and the systems haven't been there, the tools haven't been there for them to free it up and start leveraging it across departmental silos. And that's all language that, it's been around for 15 years, and it's kind of the promise of the open data movement was that we were going to free this stuff up and great things would happen. And data, it's been freed, but man, it's ugly and it's unwieldy, and it's really hard to make something beautiful out of it. And so that's kind of where we've gotten stuck a little bit, I think. And so that's certainly the root of the problem that we're trying to really hone in on. But like to the heart of your question here, I think fundamentally you have to start by providing new value with that same data set in a particular place. And you were mentioning different domains, and I'll just use an example. We do have quite a few fire departments that are customers. They're collecting, and as many of the listeners here probably know, about 85% of their response calls are actually EMS calls, not fire calls. And those calls are increasing in frequency, and every month it's up and to the right. And so that's something the fire service is really trying to wrap their arms around. Well, simultaneously, another part of our customer base are public health agencies, and the public health world is concerned with, obviously right now they're in the news even more than they typically are, but everybody knows about the opioid epidemic and trying to be both proactive and to respond better to opioid overdoses. And that's a place where those two departments actually need to work together really, really seamlessly. And so there's a data set there about where those incidences are occurring, how quickly you get there, whether or not you have Narcan on hand, what the outcome of that response is, that needs to be shared. That's historically a really hard one to share. So it's an opportunity to kind of pick some specific problems and use the data that's being collected to really showcase how something that allows you to share data between two really important departments, that sometimes it's a state, sometimes a local, sharing that data allows you to better see where you're having problems, how you're responding to it, how you need to adjust your training, and even how you can get there faster.
Yeah, that's a great example. And like you said, the data is already there, but a lot of people don't know the value of it, or it's ugly. It needs to be put into a common context. That's the term we use, is putting data into a common context and turning it into useful information.
Well, and there isn't a firefighter in the world, at least not very many of them, who got into this work to do data analysis.
Right.
And so that's that's at the end of the day, you're working with a department. They absolutely are fundamentally dedicated to saving lives and property, but the systems that they've been collecting data in aren't really very well tuned and haven't had very much attention over the last couple of decades.
So given that people in the fire department are data scientists, and I don't think very many people in healthcare are either, how do we get them to even dig up this data and find these relationships? And to me, that's one of the big problems, right? We know a lot of these interrelationships exist. It's developing good use cases and convincing people that this is something that you really need to do. It's not just a nice to have, this is like really a need to have.
Yeah, I think that's where we're starting to see smart city platforms move to, Larry, is the old idea was, if we just give you a blank page and tell you can do anything, then you'll figure it out. And I think the evolution here is, no, we have to inject domain expertise and data expertise into a solution that's already smart enough to point you towards the answers. And you just have to help us connect the data sets and then monitor your progress. And that's the forward momentum that we're seeing in smart city platforms right now.
Okay. Eddie, did you want to say something? I didn't cut you off there, did I?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Steve, maybe you could drill down a little bit into more concrete examples of, what this actually looks like in practice if you're a public health agency or a city manager. What it actually means to have the system be smart enough to give you those insights if you can point it in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll take, and I can give examples from both of those. We'll start with a public health agency, and we're in the weeds just a bit here, but there are some public health agencies that are city operated, and there's some that are county operated. Sometimes they're both. So that's just a little bit of context. It means it's a little bit, there's a arm's length relationship a lot of times between a public health agency and a city manager's office, just to make things even a little bit more complex on the
silos within
side.
silos.
Yep, you got it. You got it. Well, and then there are geopolitical boundaries that don't line up with that, and even how we collect. We use a lot of open data sets as well, and we'd like to think of them as a good long-term indicators of outcomes. But what else? Those geographies don't line up either. So you've got like a census tract that doesn't match a fire district, or a police beat that doesn't match the city council district, that doesn't match up well with the city boundary. And by the way, you may have 19 cities within a county, all being represented by one county health agency. So, I mean, it is a complicated web that we built for ourselves, right?
It's almost like the folks in the government weren't data scientists or something.
Well, there's a lot of there are good reasons for all those decisions. It's just that we're to a point where some of those reasons don't exist anymore. But to be fair, like, those are solvable problems too. I mean, when you get into the heart of geospatial analytics, I mean, that's at its most abstract. We're saying everything happens somewhere, and for our customers, that where matters a great deal. Place is everything, and if we can think about data as being in a place, then you can draw whatever boundaries you want around it, and we can just apportion it to that particular spot. And so, again, this is in the data science part of it, but I do believe, actually, we're at a moment where we can start to, think about the data points individually and then start wrapping them to match the geopolitical boundaries that we're used to governing from, and to have that make sense in a much more deliberate and quicker way.
Mm-hmm. So if I'm an owner operator or end user or municipality or whatever, how would I go about implementing this kind of thing? I mean, I think one of the reasons we have this sort of hump to get over, in the end user community as far as adopting these kind of platforms is it's kind of a big technology puzzle for a lot of these people. And it's like, how would I even tackle implementing this? And we always tell people you can start small. It doesn't have to be this big bang implementation, this overarching sweeping thing. And you gave the example of some fire applications and so, I mean, where's a good place to start? How do you start?
Wherever you've got a good champion. I mean, and I completely agree with you, Larry, that you're really just looking for somebody who wants to take this on, and you want to get them some wins. And so I actually love starting with fire departments. We've talked a lot about them today, just because they have some, they're a relatively high profile department. They're a department that has some budget, and they're looking to be leaders in the community. And they really, there's a charge to be responsive and responsible with all of the taxpayer dollars that come their way. And so that there's a lot of alignment there. But that doesn't have to be the case. We have plenty of economic development customers. We have plenty of city planning customers. We have city managers that are into performance management. Really, it just comes down to, I'm somebody who really believes that we can use data to make better decisions, and I have a place that I want to start. And to me, that's the only ingredient required, is just picking off something small enough that you can use an example all across your own agency. The cool thing is, once we have we've got about 70 fire departments now as customers. Once you start getting some scale like that, it's easy for us to say, oh my gosh, look, for cities between 30,000 and 50,000 that have these fire hazards, here's what best practice looks like. And we have the customer base to kind of help push that forward. So when we bring on another new customer, it's not like they're turning on their computer and they're opening a blank page. No, we've already got their data integrated, and we're starting them from best practice, not from scratch. And they can start from that 80% done right out of the box, rather than having to open up a new dashboard of pick the name brand and having to assemble that themselves.
Yeah, that's a huge time saver too, actually having that out of the box. And that all comes from that previous, experience on projects and all those data sets that you get from all those other customers, right? So you're able to take advantage of that, once you start implementing that, right?
Absolutely. And it's, at the end of the day, probably the question we get the most from our customers is, what's everybody else doing?
Everybody wants to benchmark themselves.
A silo. Yeah. It's both a benchmark, and it's just like, this is the first time I've done this. I'm putting myself in the city manager's hand, or whoever, head here. This is the first time I've done this. I'd really like to know what the cities I admire, how they accomplish this same thing. It's a completely reasonable request. But just as these data silos exist within an agency, the best practice silos exist in an interagency way. So I think that's a fundamental thing that will really shift us as we're thinking about smart cities and smart city platforms over the next decade. It is encoding that expertise into the platform so that a customer doesn't have to build it all themselves.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that too, capturing that expertise and putting it into the system.
So Steve, what are your customers generally trying to achieve? Like what's an example of how they leverage this platform to improve their operations, or what are they trying to do?
Yeah. So they don't say this out of the box. Like that typically what they'll say in the beginning is, yes, I'm trying to improve operational efficiency, or I'm trying to, I need help proving why I need a new fire station, or why this public health initiative matters, or why our economic incentives are required, right? That's where they start. But what I've seen is sounds a little bit more like, it is really hard to communicate about data, and it's really hard for us to show why our work matters in the world, and that's what we really want your help doing.
Right.
What I really need is a way to communicate about why what we're doing matters, and I want to show that with fact, right? And that's, to me, that is the 90% of our customers are asking us to help them prove that what they're doing matters in the world.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I think it's called data storytelling sometimes.
Yep, 100%. Yeah. And we have this, we like to think of ourselves as doing data science for public service. That's what we say internally here. But we take a broad view of what data science is, and we couldn't agree more with the idea that where most data science falls down right now is in the design and storytelling. Because right now, man, if it doesn't look beautiful, if it doesn't look like the New York Times created your infographics and the story isn't compelling, then forget it. Like, ain't nobody going to read that. And so that's for sure where we see the biggest short-term opportunity is, like, man, we just have to be better about storytelling, because that's what's going to prove what you're doing matters. It's not a bar chart.
Yeah, the visualization and presentation of data is huge. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing as far as improving the effectiveness of how customers view data? Because I know that's a big challenge. I mean, it's easy to build a display. I came out of the world of manufacturing. And if you want to go back like 10 or 20 years, if you want to see some really terrible operator interface designs, you'll find them in the world of manufacturing. But I think we've come a long way. So what is MySidewalk doing to improve, the science of visualization for people?
Well, I mean, the good news, bad news here is I'm not sure that we've made that much progress as an industry yet. Just that, there's a lot of, it's not hard to do better than what we've been doing historically, I guess. Let me put it that way. I think the way we see the world is, most of our customers, their customer is an everyday resident or an elected. And so we try to view data visualization, data storytelling through the lens of, okay, this is going to be presented to a resident or a city council person, which means they have to be able to navigate these things. So it has to be mobile responsive.
Yeah, not an engineer.
Compliant. Yeah. No. But more than anything, like, full stop, it should look like a website. It should look like something they know how to navigate, right? So honestly, that's been our design inspiration, is anybody anywhere should be able to navigate the artifact that we're creating, the data story that we're creating with our customers. And so that for us, that's what we're working towards. It doesn't look like a dashboard. It looks like a website that I know how to navigate.
Okay.
Maybe it would be helpful for our listeners if you could sort of just walk us through somewhat of a case study, and you can anonymize this with a particular customer if you'd like. Who were they? What issue did they come to you with? How did they use the platform, and what was the result?
Yeah, great question. And maybe I'll give you two examples. One from a fire department that I don't want to name, and then maybe for a city that I'm happy to name because they do a fantastic job, and I think they'd be really proud of it.
Okay, great.
So starting from the fire department side, there was a self-diagnosed real crisis of trust with the larger community and with the electeds. And it was born out of some mismanagement and some high profile, bad reporting and just bad management. That's probably the best way to just describe it. And they knew that about themselves, and there was a change in leadership. Well, we also, when we started working with them, we had the historic data. And interestingly, when you look at the data, you could see the bad management showing up in their response times. So this is in the fire service, the very most critical measure is how fast can we effectively respond? What's our effective response time to a call? And if you looked at their historic data, you could see it just going up and up and longer, and you could see the impact of bad management on something as fundamental as their response times.
Right.
Well, calculating an effective response time is actually a really complex thing because you've got a whole bunch of call segments, and there's geography and evolution of the demographics below it and all that kind of stuff that are involved in it. That's something that we make really, really simple. And so when there's a change in leadership like there was in this particular example, we could show not just that there was this real problem, we could identify where that problem was, and we could track progress to it. And so we were able to show in just a matter of 6 months that through better management, by building trust, by really communicating about how effectively they were responding, we were able to cut about 45 seconds off of that effective response time. And that 45 seconds, by the way, every 30 seconds a fire doubles in size. So that's a big deal.
Yeah, that is
in
a
the
big
fire
deal.
service. So it's totally a credit to the customer for recognizing the problem, and then also for thinking about how data can help them solve that. And the best part is, on the other side of it, not only do they have the data to show that they've made these improvements, they're sharing this publicly. So this is a resource that's available to every resident in the city, and they can see that this department that's gotten all this bad press is now becoming an industry leader, and they've got the objective data to prove that that's the case. So
Wow.
So that's one example.
So
yeah, it's
because
fantastic. It really is good.
Yeah, it's one thing to make improvements and come out of a rut, but there's serious inertia in public perception. So it's a whole other thing to actually prove it and actually turn that perception around.
Well, and you better believe that gone are the days that a fire chief can go to council and ask for a new truck or a new station or a new piece of equipment and they just get it, right? You have to be able to prove that there's a need, and then you have to show that it's working like you said that it would. And those are things that are doable now.
Right. Well, that's great. And then the second example was of a city.
Yeah. So Kansas City, we're headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri, which is really fortunate for us. And I think that the city, the local government here has had a big impact on our trajectory.
Oh yeah, they've done a great job here. Yeah,
they've done an amazing job. Both, the executive leadership is fantastic. Everybody does a fantastic job. We've had the pleasure of working really closely with their data team, and the data team in Kansas City has put a great deal of weight on resident feedback. So they've got historic quarterly sentiment data going back 10 years, and that's a data set that we're extremely interested in helping them decode, and it's one that they use as a top line performance measure, which is not everybody's that brave, right? So that's a place where I would just, the insights that they share, the risks that they take with the data, with that data set are, I think, kind of best in class. And it's a really neat data set to be thinking about how does it intersect with more operational smart city data. Because at the end of the day, resident sentiment, their actual happiness, their quality of life is really what we're trying to improve. And so the leadership they've shown with that particular data set is something that I think others should aspire to. But it also helps, I think, for all of your listeners, it's an important data set to also realize that, it's not, that outcome data is not always as simple to decode, or doesn't always tell you what you think it's going to. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is there's a question that they ask, and it's about how safe you feel in your neighborhood. And it's about how safe you feel at night, how safe you feel in the day, how safe you feel in the downtown. This is a question actually that cities all across the country ask. It's easily interpreted as being a data set that's representative of crime. And what we've seen when you actually dig into it is that the correlations between how safe you feel are much tighter when we look at whether or not the person is employed or whether or not the person is proximate to vacant properties.
Oh, yeah.
Than how close they are to crime.
Yeah, it's a very subjective question. Yeah.
You got it. Yeah, you got it. It is. And there are lots that are like this. They also, by the way, we've seen that the single biggest variable to impact resident satisfaction is two things. One, better communications. That's probably, you kind of guessed that one. So better communications best improve your overall satisfaction scores of everything. And then if the hometown team can win either a World Series or a Super Bowl, that also tightly correlates with resident satisfaction.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, was there a bump?
So yeah, this is a happy time in Kansas City.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's fascinating that when you poke into the data a little bit, you uncover correlations you would just not expect, or lack of correlations you would not expect.
Yeah,
Well,
you have to be careful not to draw false conclusions, right? I mean, data science is not foolproof, so yeah.
And when you think about it, when you kind of zoom out, that what's really cool about what they're doing is you have something like service delivery data. So, they've just recently decided to take back a privatized trash service contract because they were able to show, one, residents in their city-run trash districts are more satisfied with their service. Two, they have the missed trash complaints, so they've got the 311 data to prove out like who's missing their routes when, so that they're able to look at that. And then three, they can put all of that together in a compelling data story that they take to council and make a policy recommendation around. And so those are, they're different data sets coming from different places that integrate citizen sentiment and performance data into a compelling story that you use to save the city $1 million.
Mm-hmm. And then you wrap that up and communicate it, and then you can actually get support for a real change. Yeah,
it's really that financial impact. Yeah. That's using this data to really make an impact, but both financially and in terms of, the quality of life for the residents. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah, and that's what an easy story for the city council person to go to his residents and say, look, I'm going to get you better service and I'm going to save us $1 million, and I've got the data story to prove it.
Well, that's really good. I think we're kind of reaching the end here. It's been about 30 minutes, I think. So is there anything else we want to add? How about resources? What are some, good resources we can go to, Stephen, if you want to find out more about MySidewalk, more about data science or anything?
Yeah, well, there are lots of great resources. Obviously the What Works Cities folks are always publishing good performance management and just kind of good data, best practice information. The Civic Analytics Network run out of Harvard always has good good content that I'd push people towards and have good case studies. And then I'd also, I'm kind of biased, but I think our blog has good content on it. We're always trying to share best practice amongst our customers. So if you go to MySidewalk.com, you can find that. And we try to push this stuff out on Twitter too.
Great. And of course, if you want to find out more about what we're doing at ARC in Smart Cities, you can go to www.arcweb.com. That's arcweb.com. Stephen, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. I think it was a great discussion. I think, these are obviously pretty big challenges that cities are faced with today, but we're making things easier and making this whole concept of smart city platforms make some real economic sense and sense from the quality of life of the people that live in these cities. So I want to thank you for joining us today and providing us with some really good examples of how we can do just that. So once again,
great. Thank you for having me on, Larry. I appreciate
thank you too, and I hope we'll have you back on again. Very good stuff, and Eddie, thanks for joining us today too. This has been the ARC Smart Cities podcast, and thanks for listening.
Broadcasting from Boston, Massachusetts, the Smart Cities podcast is the only podcast dedicated to all things smart cities. The podcast is the creation of ARC Advisory Group's Smart City practice. ARC advises leading companies, municipalities, and governments on technology trends and market dynamics that affect their business and quality of life in their cities. To engage further, please like and share our podcast or reach out directly on Twitter at Smart City Viewpoints or on our website at www.arcweb.com/industries/smart-cities.